Hey guys, Brent the Build Show today, talking about windows, right? We've got historic windows, we've got new windows. We recently had a project where we were asked to compete our windows against the big boys. What's the difference? You know, why would you choose our window? Why would you choose their window? We're gonna break it out today on the Build Show. So guys, we're talking about windows today, right? We've got historic windows versus new windows. We recently had a project, 1910 schoolhouse, they wanted windows, historic windows. And as a caveat, they asked us to price windows from the big boys, right? And so we got our pricing back and we were, I don't know, $1,500, $2,500 a window, depending on the size, depending on the details they put into it, versus about $500, right? Why was their windows so inexpensive, right? And so we began to break it out. Well, we realized that with our historic windows, with the wood that we were using, with the historic glass, with the true weight and chain pulleys, right? We were putting a lot more into our windows. And so when we asked the big guys, there's about 6 companies that we asked to bid this project, to actually put good wood in it, you know, to do the weights and pulleys, to really build it like an historic window, to match profiles. 3 of them immediately said, we can't do that. 1 of them said, we can do some of that, we can't do all of that. And 2 of them, when they did price it our way, right, one was right with us, and one was even more expensive. So began to realize that part of what's happening with our windows is we're putting a lot of really good quality things that were done 100 years ago, 150 years ago, that are no longer done. Let's talk about some of those things. First is, here's a cutaway of a window we did for a courthouse, is that our windows have true divided light, okay? What that means is that each pane is its own separate thing, and it's separated by these mutton strips, okay? These are called muntins. And so there's putty glazing on there, which we know lasts a very long time. Solid wood construction, right? So that there's no finger joining. It's good wood. This is actually fir, which is a good wood. We also build windows out of sapele, which is even better wood. Our windows have these weight pockets and these weights that go, so these windows are counterbalanced, right? We have really great brass hardware in them. We can weather strip them. We can put historic glass in them, so they have wavy glass. These little horns and these little ears on the bottom of the windows are an historic detail that enriches and enlivens the window, right? One of the things I always talk about is that the difference between good and great is about 1/8 of an inch. What I mean by that is that there is a depth and profile that happens with these windows that is richer, okay? So that when this window is stuck into a building, it's actually set back a number of inches, 8, 10 inches sometimes, whereas these windows oftentimes sit right on the face of the building and there's no depth and shadow line. And that kind of little detail can make a big difference when you're building a house. So now let's look at what the big boys are doing and how they're building it, right? I get that they are a production company, right? They're trying to build things as cheap and fast as possible. But what that means is that what ends up happening is after a certain amount of time, the window is cheapened to a point where it's just a commodity, right? It just doesn't matter anymore. The first thing you'll notice is that these windows are finger jointed, okay? What does finger jointing mean? Finger jointing is when you see different colored pieces of wood like this, it means that they have been cut and put back together. If you watched my wood video, okay, if you watched the video I talked about wood, basically with plantation trees these days, there are a lot of knots in those trees. And so what they'll do is the board will come through and it gets graded electronically. They cut the knot out of it and then they take those 2 pieces of wood and they join them back together. Now the joint that they use is what's called a finger joint, okay? What that means is that their knife comes along and cuts these little teeth into it so that the board can be glued back together, okay? And you can see that on the brick mold here a little bit where these little teeth are coming back together, right? Where I sanded this smooth and you can see the finger joints. Because there are lines in here that you can see on this brick mold. And what the problem with that is that it's never going to last as long, okay? Not only is it radiata pine, not only is it a western pine, which isn't as good, okay? Forest Product Labs has come out and shown us that this is a poor performing wood, right? And so we have a wood that's going to rot, okay, doesn't perform, and it's finger jointed. So these joints are going to open up over time. If there's one thing that you should get right, it's the wood, okay? That's what's going to make your window last the longest. and they're not doing it. They're using this finger jointed radiata pine. Now, the other thing you'll notice is that our brick mold, our what's called a blind stop, okay, means that this whole piece of wood that the brick mold's sitting on is called a blind stop, okay? The blind stop was traditionally done so that the framing of the house, these windows would sit on it, and then you would screw or nail through the blind stop into the framing, okay? The way new windows are done is there's a little metal flange, and you stick the window in and you screw the metal flange to the door, so to the framing, so it's not really locked in the way that these work. The other thing is that our blind stop's 3/4 of an inch. I talked about those shadow lines earlier. This is about maybe 1/4 of an inch. It's a little lattice strip here that creates that track. Now, I'm geeking out to this thing because this is a traditional window where we're trying to get traditional lines and details. And I talked about those shadow lines earlier. Because they're putting insulated glass in their window, and in Texas that does you no good, okay? You don't have the shadow lines in the depth. Notice on this sample that I was showing you how deep this little Munson bar is. Certainly on the inside, it's very deep, maybe 1 1/8 inch, 1 1/4. Because the way they're building this window, these little mutton strips, okay, are about 3/8 of an inch thick, and so you don't have the shadow lines. I keep talking about shadow lines and everything like that, but the wood quality isn't good. We talked about the true divided light, that you actually have different pieces of glass here. This is one piece of glass. Did you know that? Let me show you. Okay, if I took a hammer here, right, if I put on my tool belt, break this window, what you're going to see here, and this has happened to us on a job where a guy was mowing the grass and a rock went up and hit this pane right here, the whole thing broke. Why is that? Well, because it's one piece. I better get my safety glasses on. Or else I could go blind here. If I could. Right? The whole thing breaks, right? Because it's one piece of glass. The other thing that happens is, now that I've broken it, you'll see that these are, okay, taped on, okay? So what's happening here is that these pieces of mutton bars are actually taped onto the window. So they got one big piece of glass, okay? They have a faux bar in here, right? This faux piece in here, but there's just one piece of glass in here, okay? I don't know. It kind of bugs me, right? It seems like a cheap way to build. It's a loss of craftsmanship, but it's a $500, $800 window, right? I don't know, maybe it's a $1,000 window. It's less expensive, right? They have done things on the construction of this window. They staple their joints together, right? They use thinner wood. They use finger jointed wood. All these different places where they're saving money and ultimately giving you a product that won't last as long. So why should you buy an historic window, right? If you're going after a traditional look and a traditional style, if you're trying to recreate a traditional style house, realize what you're getting with this, right? You will save money on your window package if you go with the big boys, but you're making compromises that if you really want to make a beautiful house, if you really want to get the depth and shadow line, if you really want to get the wavy glass and all those great details that bring the charm and beauty into the house, you really should get a historic window that matches those profiles, matches those details, because it's just better. When you're talking about historic design, it all comes down to the details. And I talk about it being 1/8 of an inch between good and great. It's with the windows, it's with the moldings, it's with the doors, it's with the hardware. All those little things matter, okay? And they will make your house more beautiful if you really have close attention to detail and really care. I'm Brent Hull, thanks for watching.